I'd like to welcome David and Paul to our meeting. Thank you very much for coming. Just to put it a little bit in the context of our organization, I guess a little over a month ago, we began to focus on the idea of retrofit as just an incredibly effective and important way to lessen climate change. And we have a variety of experience and a variety of knowledge of it. But in order for the group to decide what it is that we might be able to do effectively, we've asked a series of people who are working in different aspects of retrofitting buildings to speak with us. We will either next week or the week after have a group whose name I always forget, but which I think Rabia is bringing to us. Pigs? Never get it right.
The fourth pig.
Yeah. Who are contractors who specialize in this kind of work. And we've had several others, but we're very much interested in what you're doing because you're kind of bringing it all together. And David, as you explained to me, what you're trying to do is a kind of one-stop shop, because anyone who's kind of looked into plugging a couple of leaks starts going through the various programs, and your eyes roll back in your head, and you just it's overwhelming. And it's important to be able to understand how we can do this, and especially how we can do it affordably, because pretty well every single building in the country and the 450,000 buildings in Toronto each need something. And if we're talking about say $10,000 each, we're easily well into the billions of dollars to do what the country needs. But you have a way, I think, to begin. And the other thing to mention by means of introduction is your way into this, as I understand, has been to work within your own neighborhood, the Pocket, and begin several, I guess, what might in retrospect be called pilot projects there. And it has, and you can explain much better than I how you have gotten to the point you're at and what that point is that you're at now and what it is that you're doing. I hope that's a sensible introduction and not too inaccurate.
Fine. Are we ready? If so, then I'm going to put up a PowerPoint and let's see if this works. Slideshow from the beginning.
Working well.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
Good. All right. First thing I'm going to do is introduce our neighborhood and then show you, introduce our neighborhood, introduce the Pocket Change project, and conclude by describing how we plan to scale up retrofits by stimulating interest, making it easy for homeowners, and making it affordable. We might add a fourth category there, and that's providing a workforce capable of doing the work. That's something that Paul's working on hard right now, and he'll tell you a lot more about that. So here we go. I'm not sure, I mean, you guys just are somewhat to the east of us, but I think I should describe the Pocket. It's a community of 1,100 homes with 3,500 people. Most of our homes are 100 years old, a mix of detached and semi-detached, and Paul will tell you more details about the actual construction of those homes. We are bounded on Danforth by the north, Greenwood on the east, railway tracks to the south, and Jones Avenue on the west. And our boundaries include the First Nations School and an Indigenous Education Center, a Toronto community housing project with 2 low-rise buildings, only about 22 units. Our section of Danforth Avenue also includes the Medina Masjid, one of Toronto's largest mosques, as well as many small shops. We include Finn Park and a little parkland buffer between our community and the TTC yards. Those TTC Greenwood yards, they store and service the subway cars and house their general overhaul and repair shop. It used to be a clay quarry, and I mention this because not only because it became Harper's Dump, Toronto's main landfill in the 1930s, but because clay often goes along with water, and we are interested in researching the underground streams that go underneath the pocket, with the idea that we may be able to not only have air source heat pumps, but maybe ground source heat pumps as well. What makes this community special? You can't drive through it because of those railway tracks to the south, the subway yard to the east. So kids can play in the street, and we can have street parties. And you're going to hear more about those in a minute. Is there anything else exceptional about the community? Well, we share progressive values. But that's likely true of most communities in the Toronto. If we're exceptional, I'd say it's a product of 15 or 20 years of community development work and support from the City of Toronto. Neighborhoods need community development. And as I say, we've had some of that. And ever since we held a party in front of our house and 500 people showed up, including Jack Layton, that inspired us to start our newsletter. What are we going to call the newsletter? What are we going to call the neighborhood, in fact? Riverdale by the tracks? The slums of Riverdale? We're a tiny pocket of 1,100 homes, 3,500 people, bordered by the railway and the subway yards. So that's essentially how we got our name, Pocket. We formed the Pocket Community Association in 2012 with a mission to promote a strong, vibrant, walkable, livable, and safe community, to empower residents of our neighborhood through community involvement, and to liaise with local officials and organizations. Our Energy and Environment Committee morphed into the Pocket Change Project in 2016. And we had some pretty ambitious goals, even back then: raising awareness and inspiring action, conserving energy, switching to renewable energy, and creating a sustainable community. We knew even then that home retrofits to super insulate our houses and reduce our energy consumption by as much as 85%. That's where we wanted to go. We figured then we could heat our homes electrically, whether via the grid or a district energy or geothermal exchange system. As part of our community-based approach to home retrofits, we knew the first step was to raise awareness, to inspire action. And we've done a lot of social engagement work to build up interest and motivate homeowners. It's an ongoing struggle to convince homeowners to improve their energy efficiency and lower their GHG emissions, and therefore increase the demand. We wanted to essentially to increase the demand for home retrofits. And thanks to the City of Toronto's Energy and Environment Department, their Toronto's Greenest Neighborhoods project provided us with a cool tool, which we took door to door, MyHeat. It was a system. Have you heard of this? Folks, heard of the Toronto's MyHeat? What they did is a private entrepreneur flew over the city, all the cities in Canada, and shot them from above with infrared cameras, detecting where there were hot roofs or cool roofs. And they provided us with a map that was color coded, and you could zoom in right in and see your own roof and see whether it was green or red, or, all right, or blue. Anyway, it was a tool which helped to kindle a conversation about energy saving. We canvassed people We went, as I say, door to door, and we organized a lot of other educational events, kitchen parties, fun fests in the park, speakers in the school, tours, movies, contests for the greenest street, things like that. And we organized parties. I told you about parties. You see a party there in 2015, a pocket community party and car free day. That's what's showing on the left. On the right, you see our most recent party. Again, with it co-sponsored by the Sierra Club. It's nice to see. The last 2 years, we've been holding eco fun fairs in the spring with support from local businesses and politicians. We seek to inform the community about the climate crisis and how citizens and their governments can reduce the threat. There's a lovely video on our website that shows our basketball court covered in electric vehicles, information booths, children's activities, a public forum on the Green New Deal, and our whole team of politicians from all levels of government. It's about a 3-minute video. One of our people from our community happened to be a videographer, and he offered to shoot it and edit it and produce it. And it's a wonderful asset to have on our website. Next, I want to show you another example of the publicity we've been getting. One of the things that we've been doing, I should mention right here, is organizing pocket parties in people's homes. I learned about this idea when attending the Ontario Climate Symposium in 2018, that the most successful climate organizing in British Columbia was on one of the Gulf Islands, where folks gathered in homes, drank a little wine, and then applied peer pressure to encourage home retrofits. And it worked. We tried it and it worked for us. And soon the city was eager to help us down that path. We've had 6 such parties, several with people from the city's home energy program. After those parties, it's been easy for us, relatively easy, to collect energy audit information from over 100 homes, which was kind of a target or a benchmark, I guess we had to pass in order to the city to accept us as a green neighborhood. Moving on here. Before I move on too far, I want to just tell you, last year we organized our first Trailblazers party, where folks with retrofit experience gathered to compare notes and plan their next steps towards deep retrofits. We had 2 filmmakers capture that event and are hoping to produce a video documenting the event. In short, our community is well organized. In addition to the Pocket Community Association, we have a newsletter, website, and a busy Facebook page. And we have 20 street captains who liaise with residents throughout the Pocket. I now want to give some credit to our progressive politicians. We need them to inspire change and to fund it. As I mentioned, we were very lucky to have Jack Layton as our Member of Parliament. Our current MP, Julie DeBrusen, was one of the few Liberals who voted against buying the Trans Mountain Pipeline. She knows that we have a progressive political culture here in Toronto Danforth. Peter Tabbins, our former head of Greenpeace Canada, is our MPP, and he's a tireless supporter. Similarly with Paula Fletcher, our city councillor, and Jennifer Story as our school trustee. It's just a coincidence that her husband used to be head of environmental defense. A happy coincidence. 5 years ago, the city's Transform TO program inspired us to try to become one of 3 to 5 pilot projects they selected for funding. And our councillor introduced us to Jim Baxter, who's the director of the Energy Environment Division, and Mary Pickering, the vice president of the Atmospheric Fund, that you probably know as TAF. And their response was, great project, perfect timing, and we will help. Since then, the Energy Environment staff have encouraged and assisted us along the way. I don't know if you've met Fernando Carew, but he was he's now moved on. I think he looks after big buildings. But we had Eric Stein was a great ally, Stuart Dutfield and Nicola Lashley and others. continue to be helpful. These are people that you should get to know, Stuart Dutfield and Nicola Lashley, if you haven't yet. So if we're an exceptional community, they made us so. They created this Frankenstein monster that's making all the demands on them, because we won't shut up. We keep asking for more and more and more. But we don't want to keep sucking on their funds. We have a plan to wean ourselves off municipal funding. How is that going to work? The slide I'm showing you now dates back a couple of years. And while it's still true, it's not sufficient. We do want to do examinations of people's homes and diagnose what the problems are in each case, prescribe what needs to be done. This is the sort of stuff that Paul will be talking in a lot more detail about in a few minutes. But right now I'll move on. Here comes the serious part of our community-based approach to home retrofits. Once we've convinced the homeowners to reduce their emissions, we have to make it easier for them to do so. We want to create, as you mentioned, Dawn, I think a little earlier, we want to create a retrofit delivery center, a one-stop local shop to, I'm just wondering if I'm still in the right order. I think I am. A one-stop local shop to supervise the actual work, a social enterprise that will make it easier to supply retrofits. And by involving business scientists in the design of the retrofits, we think we can achieve annual energy savings of 50 to 90%. The current standard for a passive house is about 85%. Now here's the interesting fact. Julia Langer, the CEO of TAF, asked, why aren't building retrofits already popular? Why aren't they happening? And she says, what the building sector needs is a one-stop shop. You can read this, a tailored concierge-like experience for building owners is needed to enable full-scale uptake and ensure consistent social, environmental, and economic outcomes. She notes that deep retrofits pose complex financial and technical problems and points to the lack of a skilled workforce. Her recommendation is actually for the owners of large buildings, but it's even more appropriate for the owners of family homes. They need a lot of help to understand the need for retrofits, what's involved, and how best to proceed. Fortunately, Julia Langer also points to the solution. We need a local retrofit delivery centers. I'm just letting you read that. Okay.
This is great.
And as I say, she meant this for big buildings, but I think it applies just as much or more to homeowners who just don't know how to proceed. Yeah. So here's what I designed this for a 10-point. I had a 10-minute budget, and I think let's see, I've taken 20 minutes so far, so I guess I won't linger long on this, but I'll let you read it.
David, I have a question.
Okay, I guess, can I go ahead now and answer?
Well, it's only that, would you mind, please, to make this PowerPoint available?
Oh, not at all.
Okay, great. Just because I'm taking all these notes.
Relax.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Continue. Yeah, no,
you.
I mean, it's our mission really to help build up a stronger movement because we're going to need a lot of, political pressure, frankly, in order to achieve this because it's going to be expensive. We'll talk about more, after the PowerPoint, but I'm trained as a political scientist. So I'm very sensitive. I'm not a building scientist. I'm a political scientist. I know what we're going to need to achieve this. And as I mentioned, if Biden's promising $4 trillion, he's not far off the mark. Paul has some numbers about what this means in how many audits we've got to do every year here in Toronto. It's just an enormous job. So there are the steps. We want to set up something we're calling chores. We just made up the name, short for community home retrofits. It'll be a retrofit delivery center, a one-stop shop to supervise the work, set up as a nonprofit community enterprise to ensure that community members, homeowners, have some ownership and control over the process. And it would perform most of those 8 requirements listed in the previous slide. Something the term is often used, a concierge or a turnkey function, making it easy for people. You know, when you check into a fancy hotel, you have a concierge to look after you. The other thing I want to point out here, now we've just spent a fair bit of time this last week participating in a consultation process that the city just organized. They brought in a consulting firm from British Columbia to advise them about their strategy for existing buildings, big buildings, small buildings, homes. And they came up with some recommendations. And I guess it's fair to say, we fired back with a 4-page letter of critique, because what they're suggesting is that we really turn this job over to the private sector. They'd consulted with a lot of industry associations, and frankly, the industry associations recommended that we bring in the energy service companies. These are the big companies like Enbridge and so on that would just love to transition off fossil fuels and invest in home energy retrofits. They see it as a new opportunity for profit. And I don't know, I found that homeowners are a little bit lacking trust in Enbridge, because Enbridge won't sell you an air source heat pump, right? Because that's not in their business plan. Obviously, they'd have to clean up their game, because that's the future. But right now, they're only pushing their own, what do you call it? They'll sell you a new furnace, a gas burning furnace, but they won't sell you an air source heat pump. So obviously what we're suggesting is that I think homeowners would be more likely to trust community members, you know, a local enterprise, a social enterprise, than they would the giant multinationals that are, what do you call it, looking lustfully at the $4 trillion south of the border, and another, well, I don't know, 500 million or whatever the equivalent here in Canada, 500 billion. So let's move on. Our one-stop, got our flip pages here, sorry, man. Yeah, I mentioned that we want to set up a nonprofit community enterprise, that the homeowners have some ownership and control over the process. You might wonder how we can arrange an energy audit by our own team of building scientists, who would then offer a menu of low carbon, high efficiency building envelope retrofit strategies that can be selected to best suit the specifics and budget of each home. How can we do that? Well, we're pleased to say that one of our leading members of our Pocket Change group, Paul Dowsett, the lead architect and founder of Sustainable, is transitioning Sustainable. I think this, I'm fair to, I'm not saying anything that Paul is not comfortable with. He's transitioning Sustainable from a for-profit corporation to a not-for-profit that provides research, advisory, and mentorship services for exactly this sort of work. And we're hoping that Paul and his crew will be able to advise the Pocket today and your community tomorrow. So how are we going to do this without public funding? We're inspired by the example, I'll just pause for a moment here. We're inspired by the example of the Berwick Green Energy Program, little town in Annapolis Valley, Nova Scotia, roughly the same size as the Pocket. And they've been trying to run a PACE program on their own, but it was a bit of a zombie that only served 2 or 3 homes per year. And then about a year ago, they were persuaded to collaborate with a local engineering firm, which offered a one-stop retrofit shop that would help homeowners with technical advice, find them subsidies or grants, advise them about contractors, then inspect their work and improve payment for a small fee, 5% of their energy saving investment. That's how, by the way, following that model is how we might become self-sufficient. Anyway, this small community of 2,500 residents, smaller than the Pocket, will soon have 50 to 60 homes under retrofit. And the program took most of the burden off the municipality, but the city, this in our case, or the municipality in that case, still had to research people's credit history. We don't want to get into that. Berwick is functioning like a PACE laboratory. They've provided people with new windows and doors, solar arrays, heat pumps, so on. And they have a concierge, a retrofit advisor. He only spends about 20% of his time using his building science degree. It's interesting to note that first year they had $250,000 in loans, which meant about $12,000 to pay their energy advisor's time. But they're soon going to have 50 to 60 homes, each borrowing about $25,000 to seal and insulate, install a heat pump or whatever. That's $1.2 million worth of loans or investment, if you will, which ends up, remember, the 5% fee, that pays $60,000 in administrative fees. In other words, it's self-financing. And the Berwick people said, they've shared with us, people want to talk to someone that they trust. They want quality advice. So they serve as a broker between the homeowners and the contractors. People trust their city, their town. And the Berwick program is getting rave reviews from homeowners, and homeowners trust their neighbors' experience. By the way, CBC made a 3-minute, CBC National News made a 3-minute story about this experience, which was up on their website. I didn't see it there a month ago, but I hope it's back up. And as I mentioned a moment ago, this is where we get the idea the local advisor is more trusted than the giant energy service companies. We want to develop our capacity to scale up rapidly, beginning with tranches of 10 homes at a time, so we can retrofit all the 1,100 homes in the Pocket to net zero within the next 5 to 10 years. Actually, not to net zero, to EnerFit. It's the new standard for passive homes. Passive, and Paul can explain what that means. We've been cooperating with the Building Sciences program at Ryerson to develop archetypes of our homes. And the Toronto Region Conservation Authority has set up a sustainable neighborhood action plan to help us with our social engagement, our community development work. And Paul will tell you more about green hard hats. That's our workforce development group. Bottom line, we want to make it affordable for homeowners to retrofit their homes. Right now, the problem is you can't rely on individual homeowners borrowing money to retrofit their home, because programs like Toronto's HELP, or Home Energy Loan Program, have had very poor uptake by homeowners. And that problem's going to worsen if we're now expecting them to do deep retrofits. Currently, the cost is borne by the homeowner, and most don't have 50 to 90,000 to do deep energy retrofits. So, step 3, that's the dream. Once we've got our homes retrofitted, we can switch them all to electricity, electric heating, or set up a district energy system. Wouldn't that be ideal if we could tap the underground water and create a sustainable community? That's the dream. And at that point, I'll stop and pass over to Paul. Here's a point. Here's a statistic that Paul's worked out. Now, it's a good way to pass the torch. Thank you. I'm gone. Paul.
That's great.
Thank you, David.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you. So before I launch into things, one thing I'll just clarify about what David said, and then I'll ask you guys for questions. So yes, it is my dream to transition my for-profit company into a not-for-profit company if I can. There is some pushback from various regulators, all the way from Canada Revenue Agency on down to the Architects Association of Ontario. So it is my dream, but I'm not entirely certain I will be allowed to. So it might not come to pass. But however, before I go into sort of backfilling things that David said, first of all, I'd like to turn it over to all of you and just see if you have any questions that I can answer, because then that might be a better way to navigate through all sorts of different things I could talk about. So open it up for questions. Lowell.
Okay, hi Paul, thanks. Thanks. Yes, I just curious. Oh, I guess I want to bring up options for homes, but you know, I met the Michael Michael Labe, right, yes, about 15 years ago. Anyways, he claimed that at that time he was the only nonprofit developer, either in Toronto or in Ontario, I can't remember, where they pay themselves, everybody, a salary instead of percentage of the profit of the development, which I think, according to him, every other. But anyway, so that's a different point. Okay, but my question is, and I briefly got, you know, through social media, I asked him that again, but he didn't answer me this time. I asked you, are you still the only? But anyways, my question is, I just want to know, because, you know, like after being an architect, working for myself for like 15 years, and you know, the single detached dwelling in the suburb areas, which are, you know, much bigger in size, and they are not, the exterior walls are not of solid material. It has tremendous air movement because it's fiberglass insulation between the wood studs, and there is even an airspace. And I think it's because the brick veneer is so thin. It used to be that the brick has to be at least 8 inches, right, to the minimum. So it would get so wet. So you would have to, so that's why they put in the airspace. And then, so there's like a convection effect, right? In that, because you have to let the water out into, so is that not big? Sorry, okay. But I just want to,
yeah, what's the question? Can you ask the question?
But is that not like the most energy inefficiency in terms of, like, I think it's even more so than like a solid brick 8-inch wide wall, right? Which is, okay. Yeah, okay.
I can definitely answer that.
Thank you. Okay, I'm done here now.
I'll give you the short answer and then the slightly longer answer, and tie it back to pocket change and the types of houses you have. So fortunately, we in the older part of Toronto generally don't have the type of house that Lowell is talking about. That's more of a suburban Markham, built in the 1970s type house, that type of suburban house, Markham, Brampton, that sort of thing. And that's what's known as a wood stud and brick veneer house. So here in the pocket, we predominantly have two types of houses, and it's probably the same where you live. We mostly have either solid brick, so 8 inches of brick, as Lowell was saying, and when they were built, they had no insulation. The outside was brick, the inside was a very narrow lath and plaster, and nowhere in that wall was there any insulation. That's about half the houses in the pocket. The other half of the houses in the pocket are like my house. They started on that wood stud idea, but they didn't put brick veneer on the outside of them. They put all various kinds of siding. Also, when they were first built, no insulation in them. Now, most of those houses over time, over the 100 years they've been sitting here, people have stuffed some kinds of insulation between the studs, but it's all over the map. So what we've recognized we need to do with these older types of houses is that we need to air seal them, number one, because to Lowell's point, when there's air movement through a wall, there's a lot of heat escaping through that wall. So we need to air seal them first. And then we need to add insulation to them, whether they are the double brick houses or whether they are the wood stud with who knows what kind of insulation between the studs. So we know from a building science point of view that we have to stop thinking that insulation between studs is the way to go, because each of those studs is what's called a thermal bridge. It takes heat it bypasses the insulation. So everywhere where there is wood in the wall, which is 20–25% of the wall, is not insulation. So we realized that by overcladding the outside of the house is the effective way to do this. And also then we don't have to be as disruptive on the inside of the house. So just to tie it back and answer Lowell's question, because there is that airspace behind the brick veneer, overcladding that house without taking off the brick veneer is a complete waste of time because of that airspace. So yes, a house like that could be overclad, but you would need to take off the brick veneer and make it more like my 100-year-old house in the pocket, and then start from there, and then overclad it, and then put new siding on. So that's the kind of magnitude of the work that all of these houses that we live in, that's the magnitude of the work that's needed. Good air sealing and overcladding with insulation and a new finish on the outside. And we know that, I'm really glad that I'm the building scientist in the project and David is the political scientist, but I do know enough of the politics that people who live in brick houses do not want to cover up the brick. I know that there's a disconnect between what building science says you need to do and what emotionally you want to do. So
could you explain what you mean by overcladding? Like, do you mean that it's not worth blowing cellulose into that airspace?
So that is a strategy. Will it be as effective as overcladding? No, because you'll still have those thermal bridges. Now, one of the things you can do is you can say, well, maybe instead of adding 4 inches of insulation to the outside, I will blow cellulose into that stud cavity. You know, you can't see it when it's being done, so you have absolutely no guarantee that it's getting everywhere. That's part of the problem, unless you have X-ray vision. But you might say, okay, I'll take my chances and I'll blow cellulose into that space between the studs, but I will also add 2 inches of insulation to the outside that's continuous, which is going to be more effective. So it might be part of a solution rather than being a solution.
So the 2 inches of insulation to the outside, that's the overcladding that you mean?
Yeah.
And that could be,
it's like putting a big sweater all around your house.
and like, so what kind of material are you talking about?
So what's really important is that you allow, because Lowell talked about, you know, walls absorb moisture from the outside, rain, and in our climate, we have a lot of rainfall usually in November and December, a lot of very heavy driven rain, and our houses, especially our brick houses, the brick is like sponges, they absorb all that moisture. And then we get to our really hard freeze in January and February, and water, when it freezes, expands and it cracks the mortar and even the bricks, and the structure of the house starts to break down. So in order to stop that, we want to, in the wintertime, any moisture that gets into that wall, we want to allow it to dry out to the outside. So when we have nothing over the brick, that process can happen. When we put something over the brick, we have to make sure that that something is vapor open, that it will still allow that drying to happen. And this is why things like rigid foam or spray foam, those do not work. Those will create a tremendous problem. So you need to look at vapor open insulations, which might be things like mineral wool, mineral fiber, which is made just down the road in Milton. So it's local and it's made from largely recycled content. It's also fireproof, which is really good. So on the side walls where our houses are close together, it's a very viable alternative. Another material that is even more environmentally benign, it's actually even environmentally good, is wood fiber insulation. Now, wood fiber insulation has a little bit of a, flammable problem, so you might not want to put that between your houses. But for the end walls of the house, it's quite a viable option.
There's a question in the chat. Don, did you want to ask your question?
Well, actually, two.
Yeah,
It sounds, the reason for my question regarding certification is from personal experience and once hiring a contractor in an area where we knew very little.
Yep.
And being overcharged and we came this close to going to court. So it sounds like you're talking about a certification program, and I wonder if you can just talk a little bit about how that might work and who needs to be certified.
Great, no problem. So yeah, like we need 4 things to happen simultaneously for this retrofit, this large scale retrofit program to happen. The 4 things that we need simultaneously are willing homeowners, willing constructors, and I'll get back to that because there's the answer to your question is buried in there. We need a ready supply of materials, which we don't have right now. And we need a ready method of financing all this work. Because as David mentioned, we're looking at $50,000 to $110,000, depending on what needs to be done to a house. This is not pocket change that anybody has lying about.
That's my second question.
Unintended, yeah. So those are the 4 things that we need to occur simultaneously. So David and crew with the original pocket change project are looking at solving for number 1, making a group of ready homeowners and learning how to entice homeowners and make them ready, make them willing to do this. I realized in working with David, hold it, if we get a whole bunch of ready homeowners and there's not a ready workforce, we have a problem. We've kind of made a promise that can't be delivered. And you're absolutely right that people need certification because they need to be trained what to do. The initial idea from the City of Toronto, bless their little souls, was that they would just advise homeowners, well, go talk to a contractor and ask a contractor what to do. And when they said that to me, my head exploded because that is not the right thing to do. It's putting the contractor in an unfair position for the contractor because the contractor does not know what to do and they don't know that they don't know what to do. So it puts them in a very unfair position. So we do need to have a certification and a training program that needs to be led by people who understand fundamental building science. And most contractors have no understanding of building science. So, and this is what I was talking about, that ability of a wall to dry out to the outside in the wintertime, the ability of the same wall to dry out to the interior in the summertime. And so there's 3 forces at play that are trying to get through a wall. Heat is trying to move through a wall, moisture is trying to move through a wall, and air is trying to move through a wall. And the barriers to each of those 3 things that's trying to move through the wall, the barriers are quite different. The barrier to heat is insulation. That's fairly obvious. We could all answer that one. The barrier to air is an air barrier. And lots of things can be the air barrier. And you can have multiple air barriers and it doesn't do anything negative. The more, the better even. It's the vapor barrier that's the tricky one. You can only have one of those. If you have more than one and there's a space between them, you create what is known as a vapor sandwich. And that's where vapor is then trapped. And that's where walls grow mold, they rot, they do things. And there's a lot of different things that act as a vapor barrier. Plywood sheathing acts as a vapor barrier. Now it's on generally, when we talk about that blowing cellulose between studs, usually the plywood is on the outside of the stud and there's a sheet of plastic on the inside of the stud. Remember what I said about creating a vapor sandwich? You just did. No, you're doing all the right things. In fact, the building code says to do that. The building code doesn't understand building science. I'll just let that sink in for a moment. So how do we expect contractors who barely understand the building code, how do we expect them to understand building science when the building code tells them to build a wall this way? And it's fundamentally flawed. So we need to rethink a lot of these things, because we cannot invest, as David did the math, you know, $500 billion of taxpayers' dollars. And if we do it all wrong and we've created a bigger problem than we've solved, you know, we have to, you know, I think we all have to put our big boy and big girl pants on and just say, okay, let's follow the science. Let's talk to the experts, rather than running off like a bunch of cowboys and just doing what we think is right. I think that's the fundamental lesson here, is that if we don't listen to building scientists, then we're not listening to the right people. That's a very long way to answer your question, Don.
Thank you. It still leaves it makes sense that it still leaves the question of finance to be answered. And you're right. I mean, it certainly makes sense that we don't want to have government invest billions of dollars poorly.
Yeah.
And I know there have been other government programs that have done.
And we don't even want homeowners to invest tens of thousands of dollars poorly.
No, so the question is, where does the money come from? I don't know if that's a question to you or David or both, or
yeah, I have no idea. I mean, Seth Klein in his latest book, A Good War, is saying, you know, that our government has to approach this the way they would approach a world war, the way they approach World War II. Now, really, you know, armies move across borders and things. So borders actually matter in wars much more than borders matter in climate change. Climate change doesn't give a rat's ass about a border. And so we, you know, if Canada were to do something significant, but the US was not, what have we really achieved? So it really has to be, you know, if we're talking about on the scale of governments financing this the way they would finance a war, it does have to be a global effort, at least with all the really big players like Canada, the US, Europe, China, Russia. Like, if we're not all in, then I don't, you know, I'm just sort of speculating here. I don't know a lot, but those are the things that keep me up at night.
I wonder, I'm not, one of the things that I've seen.
Don, I just get Lowell's hand has been up for a while.
Excuse me.
Are you willing to give him next question? Okay.
Thank you, sir. So you're saying, even, you know, the Durock, you know, the exterior ethos company, you know, they do, you know, I think they do a lot of buildings with, like, you know, they would add exterior outboard insulation, like the other word that you were saying now. I can't remember how you describe it. Outboard. You used another term, but they would do that, like, to a lot of, I think, like, additions and stuff, right? When they retrofit. And so you're saying that's not good then, because it's a vapor trap? Because
so what they've actually had to do, and this was based on the leaky condo.
Oh yeah, right. Because they have the yeah.
They've actually had to score grooves down the back of the insulation, and we'll call it insulation in air quotes, because as soon as they do this, it's no longer insulation.
Really?
It's substrate for stucco, because they have to score grooves down the back side of it as a drainage cavity, and so that any moisture that's getting trapped in there has a way out. Well, now they've done exactly the same as they did with that brick veneer you were talking about. They've added that drainage cavity that air gets into. So now the insulation is not doing any insulation. It is holding up the stucco. That's all it's doing.
So like, how much do you think is like a lot? You would lose a lot of. I thought that was like. I thought you would, like. I was hearing from homeowners, and they would say like, yeah, that saved me like 25% if they add two layers of foam on the outside. No.
So what they've done is they've actually done a little bit of air sealing is what they've done. They actually haven't done any insulating, because all of the little cracks that used to be through their wall now have this layer of styrofoam. I won't even call it insulation because it's not insulation. It's just a layer of styrofoam. They have this layer of styrofoam and some stucco on it so that wind can't penetrate as many places. So they've done a sort of a good job at air sealing. They've done nothing for insulation, but the sort of a good job for air sealing has reduced their energy bills, which is why in what we're prescribing for pocket change and everything else we'll prescribe is air seal first and air seal well, because that will do 25 to 40% of the job.
Okay. Yeah, but the wall would, by having that jacket over it, it will not get wet though, right? Then
Correct.
okay.
But moisture comes
still,
from many places.
okay.
Okay, well, I
And
got
those-
another question.
All right.
Rabia has a question.
Okay, sure.
Can we take her question? Okay, Rabia.
Thank you so much. This is a really interesting and important combination of talks. So I really appreciate both of you and your time here. So it just sounds like an incredible project, and I want to kind of understand your vision. So it sounds like you're saying in order to do it well, you're not talking about just like small half-assed steps, right? You're talking about using the power of community development to work with an entire community of people, as many homeowners as possible, to take a series of steps so that you're doing it properly from a building science point of view. And so your first step is air sealing, and then the installation, then you're talking about adding insulation and then overcladding, right? Have I understood that correctly?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, and so by adding insulation, you're not talking about like spray foam or styrofoam, but
No foams ever.
no foams ever, because also they capture a great, like the air in the foam is carbon, right? Like carbon dioxide, as far as I understand.
Not quite, but close.
Right.
But yes, all the foams are made of petroleum products. So there's a tremendous amount of carbon emissions through the extraction of
Yes.
petroleum from the ground.
Right.
And the blowing agents in the making of the foam, what makes it fluffy, the blowing agents have enormous global warming potential. Carbon has a global warming potential of 1. It's the benchmark. And we know how bad carbon is, and its global warming potential is 1. The blowing agent for spray foam has a global warming potential of 1400.
Oh my gosh,
That
that's
was
not
the
what
look
I was expecting.
looking for. Thank you. So now there is Canadian law which comes into play January 1st, 2021. So just around the corner, which will force all foams to use a new blowing agent, which has a much closer to 1 global warming potential, but it will still be worse than carbon dioxide. So it's still not good.
Wow.
It's just less bad.
So the reason I'm asking this about your overall strategy is because we're the Toronto East End Climate Collective, and so we need to think through, like, we don't have a neighborhood with borders like the Pocket, but we need to think through like what useful role we can have in encouraging retrofits. And because like we don't have a neighborhood that we've been organizing in a community development way so that we have like 80 homeowners or 100 homeowners who are willing to do an energy audit. So if people were to go ahead, and it sounds like you're talking about building an organization from scratch, like this concierge-like organization, that like chore, I think you called it, right? Okay, so that's very compelling.
Mhm.
And so
And-
what would make you decide to do something like that over working with an organization, like a company like Green Saver, for example?
David, chime in.
David, you're muted.
There we go. Here we are. I'm back. What the lovely thing is that when we applied, I just mentioned that we applied to Environment and Climate Change Canada to work in partnership with Green Savers. They are a social enterprise. They did the blow test of my home 12 years ago and helped me put in a new high efficiency furnace. So a great step forward at the time, wasn't it? But we've refused to replace it, and it's now over 20 years old. We're just waiting, and hopefully in the next year, because we want to be one of those trailblazers that will allow us to go forward. But
You're looking
so
for an air source heat pump?
yes, yeah, I
Okay.
think that's how we will heat our home in the future. It will be powered by electricity. But I think before you want to switch over to electricity, you want to make sure your home is very, very well insulated. Otherwise, your electricity bill is just going to shoot up, right?
Yes, yes.
But I'm intrigued by your question of what useful role you could play without having fixed boundaries. I think if we could get, we could infiltrate Toronto with a more energy conscious, retrofit informed people. We could create a movement and put more pressure on the politicians if they know that we're spreading and we're creating a movement of climate informed people. It's going to be, that's the kind of thing that we need. We need to have first a dozen and then 100 and then 1,000 of you. So please keep up your good work that you're doing. It's most encouraging. Paul, you put up your hand.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, David. And Rabia, I just wanted to add a little bit to go back to answer some of your question. Why don't you work with somebody like Green Saver? Well, actually, we are working with Green Saver.
Okay.
But Green Saver's mandate is to save energy. And whereas that's what we've all been taught is the important thing to do, it's actually not. We actually need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. That's what we need to do. That's what's causing the problem. Our use of energy is only causing the problem because we burn fossil fuels, which create greenhouse gases. So that is our real target. And Green Saver is looking at energy. So they're actually some of the first people that we need to educate that yes, you can save a lot of energy by using spray foam.
Right.
But you're not solving the problem. The problem is reducing the greenhouse gases that we're putting into the atmosphere. And by using spray foam, you're likely putting more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere than you're saving by the energy saved through burning fossil fuels. So we need to look at this from end to end through a greenhouse gas lens.
Lowell?
Okay, thank you, Don. Yes, sorry. Okay, yeah, I guess I want to ask about this. I go to, actually, it wasn't even a building trade show. It was like health and wellness or something. And there was these window retrofit companies that they would do like, I don't know, maybe like a plexiglass window add-on. Do those things, like to the inside of a building, inside of a window, they would be, much cheaper than, replacing a window. And like, it's something that, maybe like even like a community group can do, right? Would that do anything, you think?
It'll do something. Will it do a whole lot? Probably not, but it'll do something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it'll save a bit of energy, which means you're burning less fossil fuel, which means you're putting less gases, greenhouse gases. But then you also have to look that it's plastic, and plastic is made from petroleum. So look at
that's true.
it.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so I was part of Green Neighbor 21. I would attend. They were the first Green Neighbor group, about 15, 20 years ago, and they were trying to do the home retrofit back at that time for a couple of years. They would, there would be like community meeting, and but I guess, but they didn't get enough people in the end to like. I'm not sure. You know, there's the eco fair, you know, that happens in the barns, and so they would table there and for a couple of years, and then it just kind of fizzled out after a couple of years. They tried, but you know, they would like talk about like weather stripping, you know, doors and like serene wrap, right, the windows, and then I guess people just, you know, at serene wrapping is kind of hasslesome, right? I guess is that the word. And what else do they do? And yeah, caulking around them, but I don't know. So I just thought I'm gonna put a damper on things, but no, I just thought I'd bring that up just so that you guys, if you guys want to talk to the Green Neighbor people, because some of the people are still there, like Lee Adamson. And things like that. Yeah, okay.
We are definitely plugged in with them as well.
Okay.
They're also a group that we're helping to educate.
I see. Okay.
We're realizing there's a lot of very well-meaning groups that are just not as informed. And our first job is to inform them, because they're the first vanguard that we need to get out there. We need to get them out there giving the right message. They're 80% of the way there to the right message, and they're just missing that last 20% that turns it around so that they're actually focused on greenhouse gases, which they're actually a very receptive audience to the message, which is good. And with apologies, y'all, I'm now late to join my next call, so I will turn it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
This
Thank
is
you,
hopefully
Paul.
the beginning.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much.
I'm happy to stun you with science anytime you want.
Okay.
I got lots of it. Okay, thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Ting, you have a question.
Yeah, I think.
Just one
I
sec.
think yeah.
David, are you okay to stay for a few more minutes?
Yes. And I see the question that's up here. Is it the question from Ting? That's the kind of question that I can help with.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely feels like it's meant more for David. I'm sort of wondering about the organizing timeline and sort of what it looks like with these block captains that you guys were talking about. Sort of what are the things they might be doing to get the neighborhood involved?
I'll be honest with you. We are experimenting. We are, if you will, flying by the seat of our pants. We're going to try this, we'll try that. We'll do anything. You know, we are learning as we go, and we're making this up as we go. There is no formula that I've found that is the perfect magic formula. When you asked about block captains, I'm not sure if we should be organizing on the basis of one city block, or is it better just to, we're a small community. We're getting a better sense of who's got the time and who's got the talent to help. Let me tell you with some excitement about, we just had a meeting, our executive, we are ramping it up. We're proceeding. We think we can begin doing stuff at relatively low cost. Like I mentioned, this business of helping to air seal the homes in our community. It's a low-tech solution, and we can get started on this right away with caulking guns. That's all you need, really. We're lucky because Paul happens to have a blower door test. That'll allow us to quantify the results, but you don't need to. Any of you, as you probably all know, can get out there with a caulking gun and make sure that there's no cracks on the outside of your house that are letting either the heat in or out. So it's low tech, and yet it can make such a fundamental difference. Paul was saying 15 to 40%. Sometimes here in the winter, in our homes that you can feel the drafts, right? Mm-hmm. And that's not hard to fix. So we can do that. And we're planning to organize bees, work bees, a team of about 4 people to do a house over the course of a weekend. We're training, we have about 3 or 4 or 5 people right now that have the know-how to do this, and they would head up the team, and we'll be training people over the coming next few months so that by springtime, we hope to be able to hit the ground running. That's just one concrete example about what you mentioned. And we're hoping it'll be a learning experience for people, because when somebody comes around and offers to help reduce their, their heating costs and better seal their house, we expect them to be quite receptive. We hope to be able to get some of the materials subsidized by the companies that are anxious to push their products. Because if we can be pioneers, and I'm inviting you to join us in this, if we can be pioneers, we're going to be starting a big movement that's going to sweep across the country. That's what has to happen. So let's arrange bulk buys. We're already talking to the Harvard Village Residents Association. They're sort of like you guys, right? And I've been invited to speak to the retrofit group from the Lynn Adamson's group, Climate Fast. So imagine there's four of us, communities right now here in the city that are ready to get started, that want to get going. We don't need to wait for the federal government. Probably it'll take federal government funding before we can begin deep retrofits. But imagine if you get energy savings of, let's say, 20% per home, and you're doing 1,000 homes. My God, that's a lot of greenhouse gases. You've made a major contribution right there. And that low cost, low tech, it starts the conversation. People become better informed both about the need to do it and how to do it. That's how we hope to start. Are there other questions?
Awesome. Thanks, dude.
Rabia, please.
Thank you. So I would love to volunteer to be trained with my caulking gun, to figure out how to do all this in the next couple of months. I think that'd be fantastic. That fit exactly with like why I joined Teak. That my friend Kate and I said we want to go from home to home with a caulking gun, and just like that's exactly the language we used. We said that's why we're here. We want to get hands on.
You're our girl.
Yeah, I'm into it. And I could really relate to what you're saying with having a really old furnace, but not being willing to switch it over, because it means right now the option is just another high efficiency gas furnace. And ours is much older, so we may have to just go ahead and do that, like bite the bullet and go ahead and do that. I know.
They can patch it. I've been patching mine for 5 years. I put in all new parts, but anything to avoid, a whole new furnace. I'm stretching out the life as far as I can go, and until
we're
finally
at like 35 years plus.
Wow.
I know it's like the risk is like it'll stop in the middle of a lockdown,
Yeah. Well, then one of our executive members, Lisa Repo Martel, she's an actress by profession or training. She's gone ahead and just put in an air source heat pump, and she's done a little bit of retrofitting, like air sealing around the house, to improve, to reduce her leakage. Paul's worried that her electricity bills will go up. They may go up a bit, yes, because she's putting in a new furnace as well. The company probably was very wise. They sold her 2 products, air source heat pump and a new furnace. She has the furnace for when it gets to be below -20.
Yeah.
Then you need a furnace. You can pay a lot more. There are some high efficiency heat pumps that can go down to handle that kind of temperature, but you end up paying twice as much for your heat pump. So she was able to get subsidy, I guess, from Enbridge to get a new furnace. So she's got, that little bit of subsidy you get. But she only intends to use that furnace. They figure it'll be less than 10% of the time, much less.
That's interesting. Yeah.
You can do it's not rocket science. You can figure out how many days in the winter does your temperature go below, let's say, -10, -15. Very few.
I think the question I have is because we're not looking to start an organization like Chore, right? So we're dealing with people who have to use the contractors the way they are now. And I include myself in this. Like, I'm just outside of the pocket, you know? So I have Green Saver coming on Monday to look at my house. I've already done my energy audit. So for me, someone like me, and for me, you know, the useful thing is to learn, like, what are the, and Fourth Pig is a green building co-op, and they're also going to address this, you know? And so the useful thing is, like, where can I push a contractor on materials? Where can I push a contractor in their process so that now I know, like, no spray foam, you know what I mean?
I think what I would do, what I'm going to do, I'm going to call Paul in. And whether I have to, how we're going to pay Paul, I'm willing to do it. You know, it may be a few $100, you know, hopefully it's not more than 1,000, but I want a day or two of his time to give me a complete, if you will, a retrofit shopping list. Like, what do I have to do in my house, taking account of how it's built? You know, he's familiar with these houses, but, and I imagine your houses aren't that much different. You're East Toronto. I want a prescription of what to do. And one of our executive members is a local handyman, trained as an engineer, but that's what he's doing. And he's quite, between the two of us, we can do it. We can do a lot of the work. Green Savers, like, we're working, I developed this partnership with Green Savers by phoning them up and describing what we're doing. And they just said, oh, this is such a good fit, because they want to learn. They want to come on board. Yes, some of their ideas are 20 years old but that was the prevailing wisdom 10, 20 years ago, right? So firms like Green Savers have to learn. They want to learn. They want to be part of this. Well, they hired this guy as director of business development. Now he's got to do 400,000 homes, poor guy. Like, what a business opportunity, right? And they're a social enterprise, so they're not like rapacious capitalists. They've already got now 200-300 people working for them, but that'll soon be 2,000 or 3,000 people. Yeah, hopefully. And I'd rather work with them than with Enbridge, frankly.
Yes.
So they can learn, and and they want to learn, right? I think they'll be hiring building scientists to come on board at Green Savers to help train all their staff. We got to make sure that happens. So in this case, though, if they don't have those people yet, Rabia, let's call in Paul, come out to your house, take a look. As I say, he's in that transition. He'd love to be a nonprofit, but he can't. He can't offer professional services that undercut the rates of architects without getting in bad trouble.
That makes sense, yeah.
It's a delicate situation he's in right now. But he's trying to fight his way towards, offering free services. Maybe we can get him paid by the city. That would be ideal as our concierge. That's what the city wants to set up. They want to set up a concierge service of their own. But they're not there yet.
Are you guys, sorry.
Don has had a question for quite some time. Maybe
it is almost a direct, my question is almost a direct lead from Rabia's question and what you've been talking about, David.
Okay.
My question is money. How much, and I know it's an incredibly complex question, but it's a question of how much money do you save? Can you save? And I know it depends on what you do and what your specific situation is, but if you can just kind of give us, we talk about your own situation, for example. You're doing, can you pay? And the real bottom line is, and this is really what I'm asking, is can you pay for the work that you're having done from the money that you save by doing it? And if so, how many lifetimes does it take to pay that back?
Longer than my lifetime. Yeah, so, I'm 69. It's going to take, if you spread it out, amortize that over the next 20, 30 years, it's going to be 20, 30 years of payment. That's why we need governments to get involved. I don't think the average homeowner can afford to do a deep retrofit. We are going to be trailblazers. The city has told us that they will help us. I think I know they've just refinanced their home energy loan program. and they've set aside some money to encourage deep retrofits. They're trying to, they realize that they're sticking their necks out as pioneering a little bit, because it'll soon have to be the federal government that'll have to step in with the billions that are required. In the interim, we need to get some communities, some individuals to stick their necks out. So my wife and I can afford to do that. Payback, I think it used to be suggested that there would be a, what do you call it? That this thing could pay for itself over time, but it would take a long time. Yeah, 30, 40 years, I think, to pay back. Well, it depends how much you invest, but I mean, it's easily possible to spend over 100,000. I'm hoping we can do it for less, just because I'm relatively handy and I have a brother who's relatively handy, and if we're desperately anxious to lower the costs. If we can do bulk buys in some of the materials required, like the rock wool or the wood fiber insulation, and I think that's something that the city is very much interested in helping us with. And here's something that you can do. You don't need to be all living together like in one fixed community. If we could kind of, and maybe it's something that we do together with Green Saver. We just figure out a way to approach the big companies and say, hey, we represent 10,000, 20,000 homes. We'd like to arrange a cheaper price, a better price on these products.
Excuse me, David, isn't the major cost labor? The
yes, I was just going to say,
they're not
true.
Trivial, but they're not expensive, but it's really labor that we're talking.
Yeah. I don't think we heard Paul speaking in too much detail about their workforce development program. I've been editing his work today, so I have some idea. Most of the work that's done in homes is not unionized. It's and I'm not saying we should take advantage of that fact, but we have to train a large workforce of people who are fresh, younger people that are looking for a new job career. And I think that if we can get a whole new workforce of people ready and eager and willing to do this work, we can lower the costs. I'm hoping that we can get more people here in my community qualified to do a lot of the work, so that we don't have to pay for expensive contractors, imported contractors. Hi, Kathy.
Hey, hi.
Oh, sorry. There's my mic. I can't help but think in terms of training the workforce. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. In terms of training the workforce, the idea comes to me that in the best of all possible worlds, especially if you're talking about making these approaches community by community to start and hope gaining and gathering momentum over time, but it would be so great if there are people, young people that live within that community that are looking for work, looking for opportunities. Like it would be my favorite equation, a win-win. If you can, and not to say to these people, these young people, that this might be a line of work that you're going to do for the rest of your lives. They may choose to, they may not. But in terms of addressing an immediate need and an immediate action, if I don't know who will be setting up, if you could give us more information about who would be setting up the curriculum and the training and the qualifications and the validations or verifications of having the skills to do this work. But if a percentage of young people in each community be trained to do this work, it could be so gratifying and so useful.
Yeah, that's why I think we're very lucky. We have the First Nation school, the Wandering Spirit School, as it's now called. There's a name in Cree that's this long. I haven't learned yet. I'd love to see their young people doing this. Right now, Humber College has a wonderful building science program that we're working with. City paid me, or city organized a series of workshops last year, 2-day workshops down at City Hall. I spent 2 days getting trained by the Humber College building scientists. They also do this now. They've produced a 2-hour quickie course that a lot of our executive have now taken. And that's available to you. If you haven't heard about it yet, then connect with this woman. I mentioned her name, Nicola Ashley and Stuart Dutfield in the Energy and Environment Department of the city. And you can see their videos. That's easy. Ask if you can get the 2-day course, then you'd become halfway qualified.
With the caulking gun?
Sorry? Oh, you don't need it. You get the training is much more intensive. It's a crash course in building science, and there are literally hundreds of videos they have available on how to do each step along the way. Humber has a huge library of videos that they've collected that they're making available. A lot of them are on the Better Homes website, Better Homes TO website. What else were you saying? Oh, about training. Remember during the Great Depression, or during the Depression of the 1930s, Roosevelt trained a whole lot of people as part of his New Deal.
Yep.
And we could do the same thing here in Canada. There's a lot of unemployed young people who would love this kind of opportunity. And yeah, that's why you heard Paul mention the book. I have it right here at my, it's upstairs. It's the book by Seth Klein, Naomi Klein's brother.
Right.
And it's published right here on Gerrard Street.
A Good War.
Yeah, A Good War. Canada and the Climate Crisis or whatever. So read that book. It's chock full of ideas like this of how we could gear up the country to meet the challenges ahead, because it's kind of exciting to be part of this. I'm sure it felt like in the 1930s when you thought the world was going to hell, and Roosevelt invested in a New Deal, and here in Canada it's time for our governments to step up and do likewise. So we've all got to be moving politically to put the pressure on.
David.
Lowell's next, actually.
Okay.
I kind of want to jump in at some point as well.
Hi, Lowell.
Oh,
Hi.
hi, David. Thanks. Oh, sorry. Okay. Yes, I just want to say that that Better Homes Heal. I think I went to that same course for 2 days. I'd only made it. Then it was City Hall. Anyways, the outboard insulation that Paul was talking about, the overcladding with Durock. I think there is some insulation value to it because the problem with the because that space that they were talking about, it's only by the OA, it was required by, I think it's 10 millimeter, so it's not even half an inch, right? And so and you know that, and they say that white foam is the most benign foam, right, of EPS and of all the foams, because it doesn't have as much insulating value. But if it's already made, and it's like, and I want to suggest, I keep saying this already, but there's an opportunity to use that stucco, and just, I think I might email Paul about this, to just like wrap it around the bedroom areas and leave the brick for the remainder of the house, because that's where and then you can do like paint like a mural, or something to the stucco. Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I think it is best to email Paul about this, because I feel like
sure.
it is fairly technical, and I
Okay,
feel like,
all right. Okay.
yeah.
Well,
it's
just
sort of like
one
different-
positive point to respond to Lowell. He made the point that if you have brick on your home, people don't want to cover the brick. So the compromise that's been agreed upon, really in our pocket, most of the people have agreed, they're going to leave the front facade of their house facing the street brick. So you insulate that from the inside, but the other 3 sides of the house you can clad. It's a nice compromise.
Murals on the stucco, just on the like just a plaque on the. Okay.
Lowell, right? We're really close to our 9 o'clock time here. let Ting, you think you had a question? Maybe we could make yours the last question and we could wrap up.
Actually, I'll try and be quick. Essentially, it's pointing out what Rabia was saying, right? Like, I'm very excited about educating the youth for sure, but like, we are a platform for educating a community. So like, if there is a way for us to pass on really good information to say, this is how you can grab a caulking gun and just like airproof your house 80% of the way, right? Like, that's something that would be very exciting as well.
Yeah.
Good. Nice point to end on. So we're pretty much at 9 o'clock here. Just let's all give some thanks to David and Paul.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
For a provocative, because you're forcing us to answer questions that we haven't had to answer before. Thank you.
Oh,
And just a gentle reminder, please, David, if there's some way that you can send the
I'll do that right away.
slides, that would be really great. That would be
All
much
right.
appreciated. Thank you.
Within 5 minutes. Now, you understand, and I think you, I will send you two things. I prepared this slide for a forum that the City of Toronto organized. Remember I mentioned, I think, that they hired this consultants to come in. I think they wanted me to give an alternative perspective, and we did. And so I will be sending you both the PowerPoints and the speaking notes because it's a lot that I couldn't put on a slide. So anyway, you'll get both, and then you can read them or not, but you'll get your money's worth. Okay.
David, thank you very much.
Fine.
It's kind of a technical and political and kind of hands-on perspective that I think we've really needed, and it's helped to pull things together.
Okay.
So thank you, and good luck with it.
And thank you for being there. And because I think you can really be helpful. So let's stay in touch. I mean, if we set up this buying club or whatever we want to call it with Harvard Village and yourselves, and I know there's another group up in more northerly Midtown, we could substantially reduce the cost of materials. So let's try and do it.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, please. Yeah. If there's a way that that we can figure into plans, please get in touch with us.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Let's definitely stay in touch.
Thank you, Rabia. Thank you.
It sounds like we may have the makings of a caulking brigade, something to talk about for a future meeting, maybe.